Welcome back, everyone. This will be my full Miss Marvel Episode 2 video. There were a bunch of Easter eggs and connections to everything in Marvel Phase 4, so we'll break it all down. If you're brand new to the channel, be sure to subscribe to get all the episodes. We're doing a Disney Plus giveaway for memberships. All you have to do to enter is be a subscriber and just leave all your theories about what's going on in the comments below. Careful for spoilers for the episode if you haven't seen it yet, but we'll start at the beginning and work our way through shot by shot, talking about Easter eggs and WTF moments as we go along. Starting with the episode title, it was called Crush, which is a reference to her crush on the Kamran character from the comics, and at the end of the episode how she's emotionally crushed metaphorically when she almost fails to save the kid. It was kind of a powers montage kind of episode where she's still kind of learning what's going on with the bangle and learning about the backstory of the bangle. I have a couple big theories about what's going on, but it's only 2 episodes in, so there are a couple left turns that they could take with the story. I explained during my episode 1 video how they said that they're changing her powers from the comics. She's not going to be an Inhuman like she was in the comics, but there are some Easter eggs to her comic book backstory, so I'll point those out as we get through the episode. This time, at the beginning of the episode, they actually start with the standard Marvel Studios logo with the regular fanfare, like they didn't have a special song at the beginning. But in the actual opening scene, in a stark contrast to the way she entered school last week, she enters full of confidence, like she's a full baller now because of all of her powers. And they have a record scratch moment where she bumps into her new crush, the Kamran character, who's playing a transfer student senior at her school, who's come, it sounds like, because his mother wants him to get close to Kamala so that they can steal the bangle for themselves. They're using a lot of these tropes behind a lot of love triangles, and a lot of the Bollywood references are references to the actual plot of the series with their love triangle. Because very clearly they're foreshadowing her having a relationship with the Bruno character, but there's this other bad boy character, Kamran, that they try to introduce and make you think that he's a big deal, when really he actually winds up being kind of a villain from the comics. There are a couple references to this, but he's not completely evil in the comics. It's really his family that's evil, and he's kind of caught in between both worlds. But in the comics, he's meant to be an Inhuman, just like Kamala Khan, but because they're changing her Inhuman's backstory, they also probably change his backstory too. So wherever Kamala Khan comes from with this special DNA, maybe Kree DNA that allows her to use the power of the bangle, his family probably has similar types of DNA too, like maybe they descend from Kree lineage, or they were experimented on by Kree a long time ago. The funny thing about his powers in the comics too is that his powers actually look a little bit like what she's doing with her bangle with the energy-based powers. Because it's only 6 episodes in the series, we'll probably learn what's really going on with his character pretty soon, because you meet his mother literally at the end of the episode, and she winds up being the person that the bangle showed to her in her visions. Like it's trying to show her big flashing warning signs like this is what really happened, but you don't totally understand how the powers of this bangle work yet, so you don't know what's going on. That's why literally after they learn about the party that they're going to go to, they play that song, Bad Bad Boy. Also later in the episode, when they have that funny lie with her older brother saying that he's really her cousin, like he's our cousin, that also might be a subtle reference to their families having similar DNA, allowing both of their families to use the bangle. She makes a reference to Ant-Man and the Wasp, saying that she tried shrinking and flying with her new powers, but it didn't work, also setting up the powers montage later in the episode when she tests out her new abilities. She also makes a real-life Paul Rudd joke when she says she thinks that they had Ant-Man powers because they're both charming and they look a lot younger than they are. If you don't know about that real-life Paul Rudd joke, everyone thinks that he ages in reverse, like he looks way younger now than he did 20 years ago. Her frenemy, Zoe, goes full Flash Thompson, like it's literally right out of the Spider-Man movies, standing Miss Marvel but not knowing that she's really Kamala Khan. The way that Flash Thompson hates on Peter Parker but loves Spider-Man. Eventually they do become good friends in the comics, but I think that's going to play out over the course of the series. Like, it starts out with her seeming like she actually hates Kamala Khan when secretly something else is going on, and by the end she winds up being her good friend. Her cousin Nakia, who has this big subplot in the episode and is a big part of the series, doesn't have powers in the comics. She's just a normal teenager. But without realizing it, she refers to her as the budget Captain Marvel without knowing that she's talking about Kamala Khan. A reference to her eventually taking the name Miss Marvel, modeling herself based on Captain Marvel. Later in the episode, when you're in her room, on her door, you can actually see a picture of her dressed as Captain Marvel, but with the mask on from her comic book costume. So it sounds like those are going to be inspiration for the costume that she creates for herself based on the comic book one. The joke about her name being Nightlight early on is part of her figuring out exactly what's going on with her new powers. Later in the episode, there's also a person in the crowd that calls her the Nightlight. It's just a callback to that joke. It's kind of like their version of the Spider-Man Night Monkey joke, like, look, it's the Night Monkey. They settle on calling her power Hard Light, but if this does wind up being a version of the Kree Nega bands from the comics, the way they work is kind of like the Green Lantern powers with the power rings, allowing her to turn light energy into anything she wants, also kind of turning mental energy into physical energy like the Kree Nega bands. But the way the show explains how these bands work is that the more energy they absorb via light, like the flashes from the cameras, the more powerful her abilities become. And it sounds like the bangle works in concert with her own biology, like she has to have a certain type of DNA for the bangle to work. Anybody can't just put it on. I explained this during my episode 1 video, but the big reason for them changing her powers to make them work this way is so that on screen, when she's in the Marvels movie with Captain Marvel and Monica Rambeau, all their powers kind of come from the same place relatively, and they look kind of similar. For example, Captain Marvel, big cosmic battery, can absorb and give off large amounts of cosmic energy. If Miss Marvel is fighting next to her, the bangle will absorb that light energy coming off of Captain Marvel, making it super powerful, making Miss Marvel way more powerful. And because we're talking about the Captain Marvel mythology, that area of the comics, that's why I think that we're getting into Kree Negabands territory here with partial Kree DNA. When they start testing her powers out, she embiggens one of her fists just like the comics. They're trying to make her powers look like they look in the comics, just using this completely different source from where they come from, and explaining the way they work being a little bit different. In the comics, she's literally making her body parts bigger. This time she's using light-based energy to do it. The whole thing with her not having super strength, obviously a big joke on other Avengers powers, like, oh, you're not like the Hulk or Thor, you don't have super strength. But the reason why it works this way is because in order for her to embiggen her body parts and use them that way, she has to form the constructs around her entire body, so like the construct itself supports the weight of the other larger constructs. Later in the episode, she loses control of her powers, and you see it just kind of automatically forming that construct around her. Eventually she'll get better at doing that. She'll be able to form that construct around her entire body and do like much bigger, much crazier things. The other funny thing about them doing the powers montage on the rooftop is this will remind you of Tobey Maguire's Spider-Man with his powers montage on the rooftop. Plays out pretty much the same way too. But basically the way her powers work is pretty much what you saw from the Green Lantern movie, same way the Green Lantern's powers work. When she says her powers feel like thoughts given form, that's literally her talking about the powers of the Kree Negabands from the comics. Mental energy turned into physical energy. But like I said, the way they're clarifying this, like when they have the big readout on the power coming from her body, it sounds like the bangle only activates for people with particular DNA. So when they say that the power's coming from her, it's really her mental energy turned into physical energy, but it's all flowing through the bangle itself. The mobile game winds up giving her the idea to create the platforms running across air, which she used later for the save. She makes a Thor Asgardian reference, wondering if she's got alien DNA too. Bruno says maybe, but she's not Asgardian. I'll get into this in a second, but I think this has to do with the lineage of her family being modified or being part Kree itself. Like her family is technically actually part alien. When she says there's old Arabic or Urdu writing on the bangle, I believe that's just foreshadowing for her learning more about her ancient family line and how her grandmother wound up with the bangle and her mother back during the partition of India. There are a couple references to this during the episode, the actual partition of India. That's a real-life event. The British left India, they had a civil war, and literally, like the larger India broke into two different countries, millions of people were forced to move, and that's where modern-day Pakistan and modern-day India come from. They actually used to be a single country. During the scene in the mosque, I believe that there's actually a cameo scene from the directors here sitting up front. They set up this whole running storyline with a mystery shoe thief that keeps stealing people's shoes at their mosque. That'll probably pay off later episodes and tie in with the larger plot. Then I believe when they reference the Bollywood movie Bazigar, that's meant to be foreshadowing for the future plot in the series, like part of the plot for Kamran's character will play out in a similar way with some kind of tragic redemption like plays out in that movie. And the DDLJ movie that they mentioned is more of a romantic comedy Bollywood movie that I think is just meant to be a reference to Bruno, Kamala Khan's, and Kamran's story with their love triangle. There's even a Kingo Bollywood reference later from the Eternals movie. Don't worry, I'll talk about that too, because there are a couple references to things that they talk about during the Eternals movie. The whole dance sequence when she comes back is meant to be like a fantasy sequence of what's happening in her head based on the Dirty Dancing movie. Also, I think when he's texting with her, the camera transitioning to the stars on her ceiling passing through the Captain Marvel comic book drawings on the wall is just another reference to her becoming Miss Marvel, all the Captain Marvel backstory that's part of her origin, especially with the Kree and the Skrulls literally in outer space. The transition to the world history class textbook I think is also foreshadowing for her learning more about her family's history as it applies to the backstory behind the actual bangle. History written by the victors, meaning that like what you thought wasn't actually what was going on. The same way when Captain Marvel was told a lie by the Kree so that she would learn about the truth of her powers. Pretty much all the secrets behind Kamala Khan's family's backstory, the backstory behind the bangle, will have something to do with the Captain Marvel character and the stuff from her movies. That's why I think it has less to do with actual Inhumans, Terrigen Mist, Terrigen Crystals, and more to do with what's going on with the Kree and the Skrulls. because this series will also be connected to the Nick Fury Secret Invasion series that's also about a splinter group of Skrulls trying to infiltrate the world. So it's possible that Kamala Khan's family, maybe Kamran's family, or their ancient family are also part of those Kree sleeper cells. Because literally during Spider-Man Far From Home, Talos and his wife, who are pretending to be Nick Fury and Maria Hill, talk about there being Kree sleeper cells on Earth. Also in the comics, Captain Marvel's mother secretly winds up being Kree. All these funny, awkward scenes of her losing control of her powers at the worst possible moment are just meant to be in the same vibe as Spider-Man learning about his spider-bite powers in funny ways. We didn't really get it as much with Tom Holland's Spider-Man because you meet him after he's already gotten the spider-bite, but you kind of saw it with Tobey Maguire's Spider-Man and Andrew Garfield's Spider-Man. When Bruno goes into the counselor's office, you see the hang in there cat poster in the background. That's meant to be foreshadowing for her save at the end of the episode when he's literally hanging in there and she tries to save his life. Bruno winds up getting into the Caltech program early. He's going to be this tech-based character. I think that's because with the future of her character, she's going to be doing much more cosmic stuff with her abilities, and he'll wind up helping her out create tech that will help her in her actions as a superhero. The counselor also makes a big Star Wars Jedi reference. Lots of Star Wars references so far, and there's only been 2 episodes. He also mentions The Devil Wears Prada. Later when she's driving Kamran's car, he also makes a Mario Kart reference saying that Bowser must have taught her how to drive because she's driving like a maniac. The person that they mention, Shah Rukh Khan, is just a huge Bollywood star who's been in a bunch of really popular movies. But then, like I said, they actually reference Kingo from the Eternals movie because he's been in so many Bollywood movies. They don't know that he's an Eternal, they just know that he's this big star, and they make a joke to Kingo pretending to be himself over the years, like he pretended to be his father, his grandfather before him. That's what they mean when they're joking about their mother, their grandmothers, still kind of standing the Kingo Sr., because they think that it's Kingo's much older father, when really it's actually just Kingo pretending to be his father. It would be funny if we actually see one of Kingo's movies on the actual series, but I don't know if they actually filmed any new Kingo footage for this. There might just be some posters in the background here and there. At the family dinner, they do reference more about the actual partition of India. Like I said, they basically explain the history. It's pretty accurate to the real-world history, saying that her mother's family came to Pakistan after the partition. Her family is where the Bengal comes from, and as far as the series has revealed so far, the Bengal started with her great-grandmother. And what they say is basically, as a little girl, her grandmother got lost when they were boarding the last train, and as the train was leaving the station, she somehow made it on board because she followed a trail of stars. What actually happened is it sounds like her grandmother used the power of the Bengal to basically create platforms, kind of like Kamala Khan did to save the boy at the end of the episode. Like the same thing happened at the end because the constructs she makes look like a trail of stars. Also, later in the episode, the Illuminantes, big Illuminati reference, don't worry, I'll get to that, talk about all these crazy stories that they have about her great-grandmother, who apparently disappeared after that day on the train, saying that she had all these secret lovers, people thought that she was having affairs, when really what was probably happening is she was actually trying to be a superhero, just ducking around on the DL. It'd be like J. Jonah Jameson creating a bunch of fake stories about Peter Parker, like why isn't Peter Parker ever around here? He must be off doing something bad. When really the reason that Peter Parker is never around is because he's busy off being Spider-Man trying to be a superhero. So her great-grandmother was probably doing the same thing with the power of the Bengal. And when they say that the great-grandmother disappeared after that day on the train, it's probably because somebody killed her to try and take the Bengal. Early theory is that it's probably someone connected to Kamran's family. Literally after her father says, oh, your great-grandmother disappeared one day, right after that is when she has the vision of Kamran's mother. So it's like, yeah, clearly it's probably this person that's connected to the disappearance of the great-grandmother. The whole joke about her mother and father being stans of Bon Jovi is because, one, he is from New Jersey, like they're from New Jersey, but it also sounds like they just fell in love with American pop culture. When her mother talks about loving Captain Kidd, that's also a reference to Bon Jovi because his nickname is Captain Kidd, meant to kind of dovetail with Kamala Khan's love of Captain Marvel. Like they both have their captains that they're huge fans of. And the whole thing with her mother getting super weird every time she references what's going on with her great-grandmother's family, the Bengal, is probably that her mother either knows what's really going on and doesn't want Kamala to get caught up in it because she's afraid for her life, or I think probably more likely she actually buys into a lot of the theories about the bad things that they thought that their great-grandmother might have been up to. Like she literally makes it sound like she ran away from the bad rumors behind her great-grandmother and her family when she came to America. The actual Eid festival that they go to is basically exactly what you see in the episode. It's just a yearly Muslim festival. Kamala Khan references the Illuminati, which we just saw in the 838 universe in Doctor Strange 2, when she's talking about the Illuminantes. In the context of the episode, it's just a joke that there's this group of old wives that just gossip and secretly influence the lives of all the rest of the mosque. Then they finally pay off that post-credit scene from episode 1 with damage control. It's the same agent from Spider-Man No Way Home. This was meant to take place after the events of Spider-Man No Way Home. They were originally created by Iron Man to basically clean up superhero collateral damage, but since then the federal government has kind of taken over and turned them into like an actual branch of the government. Now they're more like the FBI, the CIA. They make this big joke about interrogating Zoe, but clearly she doesn't know anything about what's really going on with Kamala Khan. Eventually she does wind up being good friends with her, so I think eventually she will try to help her. And it'll have something to do with this damage control subplot. Later in the episode, when you see them go after her with the drones, those actually look like the drones from the Edith device that Iron Man created from Spider-Man Far From Home. Like now damage control has taken the drones and are using them for their own law enforcement. When she's actually saving the little boy at the end, she does a Black Widow superhero pose. She's a total poser. She sees another vision of Amran's mother reaching out to her. It could be something in present day that's connected to the bangle, or the bangle could just be showing her a recording of something that happened in the past. Like I said, in the comics, Kamran's family is bad news. I think the whole idea here is that they want the bangle. But now we have two legit villains on the show. We have Kamran's family, and we have damage control. During the end credits, it's the same comic book art from the Ms. Marvel comics. Like all these panels are comic book panels. There's also a Tracksuit Bros moving van. Yes, Trust a Bro van from the Hawkeye series. Meaning there could be some more references to that. Like it is a coincidence that we see it out here. But this is Jersey City. It's not that far away from what was happening during the Hawkeye series. If you spotted any of the big Easter eggs in the episode that I didn't talk about during the video, just write them below in the comments and leave all your huge theories about how you think that Kamran's mother is connected to the bangle and what happened to her great-grandmother. My full Ms. Marvel episode 3 video will post next week. Also, big Obi-Wan Kenobi finale next week too. Everyone click here for my full Obi-Wan Kenobi episode 5 video and Easter eggs, and click here for my new Loki season 2 first look video. Thank you so much for watching, everyone stay safe, and I'll see you guys in the next one.